Spit Studios in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. This is the Spit Sports Show. The Boston Celtics take a commanding 2-0 series lead, defending their home court against the Dallas Mavericks. Now, coming into this series, as I've made pretty clear on this show, I had clear rooting interest for the Dallas Mavericks, and that can be a good thing sometimes. It can give you a different level of insight to the game when you've constantly watched a team over this course of a season, obviously. I've watched, I'd say 90% of all Dallas Mavericks basketball games throughout the entire season. And I've watched a lot of Boston too, because it kind of felt like about a quarter way into the season that they were probably going to come out of the East. So I watched a bunch of their games and to try to get a feel of what they presented and what challenges they brought up to whichever Western Conference team they played in the finals. And I got to be honest, well, watching an NBA game or really any sports game, to be totally honest with you, I have never, ever been so emotionally taken out of a game after the first 30 seconds. Now, what happened in the first 30 seconds? Well, nothing crazy, to be totally honest with you. Luka gets the ball, switches onto Derek White after PJ Washington sets him a screen, hits a nice little fadeaway in the lane. But what does Boston do right after that? They push the ball and get the single easiest layup of Drew Holiday's career. And it was at that point where I swear I knew that this series was probably going to be over, because that play was such a dramatic microcosm of what this entire series has been and probably will continue to be, which is the fact that Boston can consistently get better shots than the Mavericks can. The fact that the Boston Celtics constantly have 5 shooters on the floor, because their bench consists of Kristaps Porzingis, a 7'3" guy who can shoot, Peyton Pritchard, who can catch and shoot threes. They constantly have 5 shooters on the floor. They have 4 if that's their non-shooting lineup. And the issue that creates is defenses have to be really good at containing the ball on the perimeter, making sure that Boston can't penetrate and get into their drive and kick stuff where they play the best offense in the NBA. They constantly just get wide open corner 3 after wide open corner 3. And the issue that creates for Dallas is Dallas always has a lower level perimeter defender on the floor, because that's where their offense comes from. One of Luka or Kyrie is going to be on the floor at all times. So what Boston's doing is basically they know we have 5 guys who can go create their own shot most of the time. Switch one of them onto Kyrie or Luka, go at them, wear them down, penetrate into the lane, kick it out to an open guy, kick it to another open guy, kick it to another open guy, and shoot a wide open 3. And I just don't see a path for the Mavs to stop that when their strength has always been the interior of their defense and their rim protections, why they were so successful against Minnesota. Whereas on the Mavs side of the offensive ball, that didn't make sense. On the Mavericks offensive side, every bucket feels like it's earned. Every single one. Nothing's really coming easy for them, because Tatum is such a versatile defender. And if you guys want more in-depth look at the matchups and all of the little schematic things that's making Boston better than Dallas in this series, check out Hoops Tonight. It's another really great podcast on the Volume Network. I think the guy who hosts that, Jason Timpf, does a really good job. But what Boston can do is they can put Tatum on one of Dallas's centers, either Lively or Gafford. So when Luka calls up one of them to run their pick and roll, which they were killing Minnesota with all series with lobs and little shots in the lane, Tatum can just switch that. He can take Luka or Kyrie on the perimeter and be pretty comfortable in that matchup. And obviously, Lively and Gafford aren't really talented enough offensively as to where they can post up on these guys and constantly get buckets. They tried it a couple times when Gafford was on Tatum this game. They went to Gafford just straight up in the post, and he scored a couple times, but then they just went away from that. They didn't commit to it. They were trying to get Boston to take Tatum off of their center and but they gave up after 2-3 possessions. They wouldn't trust the process because they know their offensive centers are not shot creators. The box score from yesterday, this is another reason why I just don't see the Mavericks. I don't see a path for them really winning this series. Is the box score from yesterday was dead even pretty much. 47% from the Mavs from the field, 45% for Boston. 23% from 3 for the Mavs, 25% from Boston. Pretty much every team stat yesterday was dead even except for free throw shooting. That's really the only one. And yet Boston was still in firm control of the game with 4 or 5 minutes left. I know Dallas went on a nice little 8-0 run, and it definitely put some fear in Boston, but it never really felt like they were going to lose that game. In this series, the top scorer overall is Luka Doncic. Surprise, surprise. Luka Doncic is followed up on that list by 5 Celtics. 5 of them. Luka is the only Maverick with multiple threes in this series. He's the only one who can really create shots one-on-one against these guys. And that's what they're going to need to do because Boston switches everything. They're not Minnesota. It's such a different matchup for the Mavericks and such an unfavorable matchup for them. Boston's not challenging them at the rim. They just refuse to. Kristaps Porzingis alone has more blocks than the Mavericks do this series. Why? Because Boston knows the interior of the defense is the Dallas Mavericks' strength. Keep it on the perimeter, and we're going to have success. And this series feels a lot to me, and I know it's kind of a weird comparison because actually, I think it's a great comparison, to be totally honest with you. Some people might say it feels a lot like 2017 when LeBron and Kyrie went against Golden State with Kevin Durant. Now, obviously, this Boston Celtics team doesn't hold a candle to that Warriors team. But I would say this Mavericks team, I don't think they hold a candle to that Cavs team, to be totally honest with you. But it's similar concepts. You have probably the best player in the world with Kyrie alongside of him going up against a team that's just built to beat them and is just better than they are. And the best player can play as well as he can. And Kyrie actually played pretty well in that series comparatively to this series. I'll talk about that in a second. But overall, it's a team game. And if the other team has better players on it, I don't care how good you are. It's just going to be tough to beat them 4 times out of 7. Now, can the Mavs get a game? Absolutely, they can get a game. The Cavs got a game off the Warriors in that series, if you remember. Kyrie dropped 40 in game 4, and they took a game off of them. And speaking of Kyrie, if the Mavs want to take a game, he has to be way better. He has been bad throughout this series. Like, someone told me he shot 7 of 18 last night after the game, and my jaw dropped. It felt like he was 3 of 16. He hasn't had the impact on the game, not only because the crowd gets so into it whenever he has the ball or whenever he gets stopped. It feels like it gives Boston another level of momentum. He also just has been forcing the issue a bit too much. He hasn't been calling for screens as much. I think he's been trying to ISO on Drew Holiday a bit too much. He hasn't really been playing to his strengths against this Boston defense. And this shows it. He has been really bad in isolation this series. He averaged 0.95 points per possession on ISOs throughout the playoffs. This series, he's dropped down to 0.4 points per possession. That's bad, especially for a guy who averages 1.1 points per possession on isolation for his career. 0.4. Like, he's just got to be better than that. He needs to start taking better matchups. And don't get me wrong, it's hard. Like I said, this Boston matchup's just so tough for Dallas because they have so many perfect archetype bodies to throw at Kyrie Irving that are going to take him off of his game a little bit. Most importantly, obviously, Drew Holiday. This is a bit of a sidebar, but it's important too. I didn't love his attitude at the press conference after the game yesterday. Like, he was smiling, kind of just like joking around. It kind of felt like he felt he was playing with house money, which, if I'm being honest, he kind of is. Like, at this point, he's saved his reputation. Saved is probably too strong of a word, but reinvigorated his reputation around the basketball community. He has, by all measures, had an unbelievable season individually. He's shown that he's a leader, which he's always wanted to prove. He kind of is playing with house money at this point. And he acted like it at his press conference, which gives me fear going into this game 3 that he might not come out with the fire in his butt that maybe the other Mavericks will. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking that, but I didn't love what I saw there. Now, what else can the Mavs do to take a game or two? PJ Washington, you got to shoot better than 13% from 3. Tell you that right now. Derek Lively, you got to make some decisions out of the short roll, which I haven't seen him do like maybe once all series. Maxi Kleber, if you could make a couple wide open threes, that'd be great. And maybe guard somebody. Derek Jones Jr., just has he played this series? And I like respectfully, I know he's an NBA player and I like him a lot because he seems like a nice guy. But if Dante Exum ever dribbles the ball up the floor again for the Dallas Mavericks, I'm going to pull my hair out. So little things that the Mavs can do for sure. But fundamentally, at the core of it all, Boston's just the better basketball team in a better matchup for them. It's really that simple. One night, Jaylen Brown could go off. One night, Derek White could go off. Last night, we saw Drew Holiday go off. We saw Kristaps go off in game 1. We haven't seen the Tatum game yet. It just seems like Boston has too many good players for the Mavericks. The Mavericks got a couple really good matchups coming into the finals. God bless them. They took advantage of them and made it. And now they've run into a team that's just a tier above them. And I hate to say that because I want the Mavericks to win. And I think Luka's the best thing we have going in the basketball world right now as a player. But I've just got to be honest with what I see, guys. I'd love to come up here and say, I think the Mavericks are going to come back and win this in 6. That's the video I want to make. I'd love to make that video, but it wouldn't be honest with you guys. I don't see this going any longer than 5 games. And to be honest, a sweep wouldn't surprise me one bit. I had no faith watching that game that the Mavericks were going to win that game or the series. None. Anyways, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Please let me know, what do you guys think is going to happen the rest of the series? Who do you have and how many games? Do you think the Mavericks can potentially come back from this deficit, protect home court, which they have been really good at doing throughout the playoffs, although Boston is undefeated in the playoffs on the road this year? Please leave a comment. Please like the video if you enjoyed what you were hearing. Please subscribe. We just reached over 260 subscribers. Big things happening on the Spit Sports Show. And as always, I will see you in the next episode. Peace out.